This is the benefit we have of being a centralized or a research and analytics based team. We do have the luxury of being able to focus most of our time on doing that valuable analysis for our stakeholders. But if you are a smaller team that focuses on both on the customer service, on the marketing, on the analytics, that is where you can leverage a more powerful tool to really help pull that off of your shoulders. Use customized dashboards. Press the tools to help you create them. They're very good at creating dashboards for clients and for companies. So help them help you become faster with analytics.
You have another thought too, which might be to use that 2 hours to create a use case that could get you another 37 hours that week, a week to do it. So in other words, create a proposition that you can test, whether it's a business idea, whether it's some way to improve the product or something that will get closer to what people are investing in the company. If you can use the social data that way, then you can get funded, and that's clearly what you need. And so, and some of that came up in our conversation with innovation. You have to bring the data back to an organization in a way that they can use it. I mean, when from Neville Hike of Microsoft, and I interviewed him, he talked about how they used the social data to improve Windows 10 before it came out, and then after it came out. So it wasn't hard for him to argue to get more data for him. Okay, next question. What key learnings did you gather from your is that AI experiment?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so there were multiple parts to our analysis on AI, and it's continuing as we look at Google's bigger focus on AI. We're kind of looking at it more from a long-term social perspective to kind of see how's the market taking AI as a whole. And so what we learned initially from Tay, obviously beyond the fact that it was just not boding well for Microsoft for a couple days, it also led, thankfully, one positive note, it did lead right into our big developer conference build. So it kind of fizzled out a little bit, thankfully, because it was very bad. It got a lot of bad press, and everything we would have told our senior leadership was, this just does not look good. You have to weather the storm, try and shift the focus, and I think what we saw was after day one of build, where Satya, our CEO, he went on and clearly addressed Tay. He didn't shy away from it. He went right at it and said, we're dedicated to artificial intelligence. We're going to commit to revisiting it and figuring out the best solution. And it shifted. So we originally saw a sentiment ratio of, before the conference, right around the announcement, very, very low, almost an equal positive to negative sentiment. But once the conference came out, that completely disappeared. So all the positive news, so the concept of just shifting the focus rather than trying to counter it and correct yourself and apologize, is apologize, acknowledge, shift the focus, show you the dedication to AI. And now what we're looking at now is no one's really talking about Tay at all. It was gone in 2 weeks, so it lasted a couple of news cycles, didn't do well. It'll clearly make the top 10 worst blunders probably of the year in tech, but we weathered it. And I think that's something important to remember about social too, is when you're in a field that you see all of this negative and positive discussion getting thrown at you every day, it's good to remember that even on a grand macro scale, things pass. And they typically pass quickly. Even if they make it into mainstream news, they're not going to typically last so long. You need to really worry about it. And if they do, this is where you triage and you really work with customer service to help address that on the front lines with social. You work with brand teams and senior leadership to figure out if you need to do more direct action through press releases and addressing the public. So that was an interesting event to watch.
So thank you for asking that question. Do you take into consideration the cloud score of each user when calculating a sentiment ratio? I mean, that some people would argue are more important than others in terms of their influence. I guess you could look at sentiment as 100 people mentioned that, or we could say that one person really mattered because they were the reporter for the New York Times.
So our sentiment ratio is actually purely based on the sentiment of the post itself. It doesn't have anything to do with the user. So, and we actually don't use a pure three-tier scale. We do currently, and we're considering evaluating this even further, we do positive, slightly positive, neutral, slightly negative, and negative to help get those gray areas that are a little more ambiguous. But our sentiment ratio is completely based on the context of the post that the engine analyzes, and that's why, as I mentioned earlier, it's so critical to really make sure your sentiment tagging is up to date, that your system is correctly tagging bombed and forced and all these terms that can be a little vague. So we don't really use clout scores that much. We do look at influencers a lot as they relate to follower counts that are whatever's available by the social network, of course, and whatever, again, just the leveraging and the concept of leveraging your other stakeholders. We wanted to get a better sense of how do we measure whenever we get news that comes into our system. When we're looking at news, how do we better and accurately give a sense of how valuable the news discussion is? So we went to our corporate communications teams and got their impressions data of how many impressions the New York Times usually gets, and integrated in the process of integrating that into our system, so that every time it comes through our system, we can better rank influence based on what our corporate communications partners use, which is a metric that goes company-wide as well. So I would recommend is leverage other teams to give you data you might not realize you have, that PR and corp comm have so much data related to influencers, you can leverage them, or brand teams to help you understand influence a little bit better around their specific spaces. We definitely don't do it in a silo.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the most interesting things about this conversation is that a lot of times you hear social data conversations on their own and you're really trying to bring it into the rest of the data.